As parents, we want the best for our children, and we want a lifelong relationship with them. But how do we do that? How do we connect with them and communicate with them so that they become resilient, confident adults? Do we help them with their homework, push them on the athletic field, or as they age, how involved should we be? My guest today is parenting psychologist Koraly Pérez-Edgar. Dr. Pérez-Edgar is the McCourtney Professor of Child Studies and a professor of psychology at the Pennsylvania State University. She received her A.B. from Dartmouth College and her M.A. and Ph.D. from Harvard University. She has also just come out with a masterclass on parenting. She says that our actions have a direct impact on our children's ability to bounce back from rejection. Remember the saying, do as I say, not what I do? Well, that saying may be as outdated as it sounds. Here now is Professor Koraly Pérez-Edgar on how to connect with our kids at all ages.
Stand by. We're going live. We're going live. 10, 9, going live. 7, 6, 5, going live. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Koraly, thanks so much for joining me and talking about this. It's funny, as I was doing the research and thinking about what we might talk about and the communication and connection, I went back to, I'm pretty sure I heard things like, go play in traffic and do as I say, or, do as I say, not as I do, right? All of these old expressions. And I really couldn't find any of that in my research. That does not come up. That is not a parenting technique, apparently.
No. Well, it is, but it is not written down.
Okay. So when talking about this, what goes through your mind 10 seconds to air before you have to talk to parents about their own communication and connection with their kids?
I think for me, at a self-centered level, it's, oh my gosh, I'm going to sound squeaky because I don't like my voice. But also at the professional level, can I convey what I know without overdoing what I've experienced? Because those two things are not always the same.
Okay, what you know versus what you've experienced, meaning as a parent, what you've experienced as a parent?
Yes. So there's only so much, this is, I think, in any career, you are trained in the specifics of a construct, of behaviors, of data, of this broad field. And then you wake up one day and you're confronted with a child who's half naked, who doesn't want to go to school and is eating a lollipop at 4 a.m. in the morning, right? And those two things are not the same. And you can call onto your daily life, your training, right? It is helpful, but it is by no means enough. Going to school to be a psychologist does not automatically make you a good parent. And it's not necessary to go to school to be a psychologist in order to be a good parent.
And we don't go to school to be parents.
No.
So that's the other really...
No, we run to Barnes and Noble and we Google.
Right. What's the biggest challenge that you see over and over again for parents?
I think the biggest challenge is that realization, and we know it at some intellectual level, but then it becomes sort of deeply ingrained in us, that we are dealing with and getting to know a separate individual who is not simply a reflection of us, who is not simply a reflection of the anticipations and the dreams and the expectations we had both prior to their birth and then after their birth. And it sounds obvious. You're looking at your child. You know it's a separate human being. But it is difficult in the moment to realize that over time, they will make different choices than you would have made. Some of those differences come from their inexperience, the fact that they're young, but most of them will come from the fact that they are a separate being with different likes and dislikes and dreams. There's this beautiful quote from 1924 from Watson, where he talks about having his own planet and his own island, and that if you give him a child, he will make of that child what you wish him to be. lawyer, doctor, and he says, even beggar man or thief. And he says, I can do this without respect to sex, race, ethnicity, religion. And so it's very broad and open and democratic and almost optimistic. But it turns the child into an empty vessel.
Yeah.
That the child is born and we mold it into what we wish this clay to be.
Right.
And what we realize early on is that the clay has its own properties. And we can push it till the point of it breaking, or push it to the point that it doesn't reach its actual potential.
So how do you suggest then you navigate that early on? Because as a parent, you really need to be involved. You've got this little entity that can't make any decisions for themselves and doesn't know which way to go or how to cross the street. I mean, and then you jump to high school or college and you have a different role to play. So how do we navigate that early on to make sure that we are parenting the child that we have, not the one that we want? I mean, we have to make decisions.
Right. And I think we walk in with set goals or principles that I think are important and are driven by the parent. We want our children to sleep because we want to sleep. We want them to learn how to regulate. We want them to learn how to engage with the social world, to make friends, to be adaptive in our society, right? Those are big goals. But then we learn what are the things about this specific child that allow us to help him or her reach those goals. So it's not that the parent gives up his or her role. There is a hierarchy. There is a fundamental need for the parent to engage and be the one who provides structure and safety and support and guidance. We're not giving that up. But if we have a child that is what we sometimes call slow to soothe or difficult to soothe, then you might have to engage in more behaviors for more time to teach the child how to regulate and how to self-regulate. While for another child, all you have to say is no, or here's a toy, and they happily do it on their own. Right. So the goal is the same, but the parenting behavior can be quite different based on the child. Right. When the child is an adolescent, our goal is that they're happy, that they have a place in life and society, that they're gaining independence and moving away from us, right? That is necessary. But one child might want to be a doctor, one child might want to go into the trades, one child might not know what they wish to do. So there's no one size fit all, but you're helping the child learn how to reach those specific goals.
You said a couple of things there that I want to go back to and pick up on about when the child is small and sort of how we are responding to them or we are, I'm going to say coping because I know that we're going to get into that. And then the other one is, what's the ultimate goal? So why don't we establish that right now and say, let's all agree on what that ultimate goal is. And then we can talk about when they're small, adolescents, and getting older. What's the ultimate goal?
And this is hard because there is no universal, historically static goal for parenting, right? Those have always changed. And we have to recognize that. There is no one way to be a good parent or be successful. I think if we think about where we live today and the society that we have to help our child grow into, it's the ability to be self-sustaining. And I don't mean that you will never get help from others or that you have to be like, Grizzly Adams for those of us of a certain age who remember, you're not out in the woods living in a cabin, but you're able to navigate your social environment in such a way that it's adaptive to you. So you are healthy, you are happy, you have your well-being is protected, and that you are a member of a society so that you can give the same to others. And that may show up in different ways. It may be that you are a highly successful entrepreneur who is leading a business and is hard charging. It might be that you are an academic who sits in her lab all day quietly reading and thinking. It might mean that you're a stay-at-home parent, really focused on creating that nurturing home environment. As long as that for each of those three individuals, those activities feed their soul, make them happy, and allow them to be adapted to their environment, then that is success. And for the parent, they have helped scaffold their child to that success.
I go back to, I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm thinking about, I go back to just the words that come out to me is that resilience and confidence, but I'm also seeing this adapting, and I'm thinking, okay, adapting, does that mean being a resilient kid? Where do those words come into play, or is that old school now?
No, it's not old school. I think resilience is important. One of the difficulties parents have to guard against, and I had to do this too, is that deep-seated urge to protect your child from all threat. Yes, there are things in the environment, there are things in our world that we must protect our children against because it is overwhelming to them and threatening to them. But as children get older, there are things that are negative in their life that are not avoidable and that they must learn how to adapt to, overcome, and be resilient. And that can be developmentally appropriate. It can be for the small child, they have to learn to tolerate waiting, that not every demand is met instantaneously. That is a challenge to them. That is a threat to them. But it is important that they learn how to deal with that challenge.
Yeah.
For the child in school, they may have a teacher who is a little prickly, who is very difficult. How do you deal with that above and beyond the parent intervening at every turn? As an adult, you may not get into your dream school. You may not get that perfect job right away. Can you be resilient to those obstacles? And can you pull all of those past skills that your parents helped you get to then apply to this situation?
Define resilience.
Sure. We think of resilience broadly as the ability to meet, adapt to, and at least partially overcome stressors, challenges, threats in the environment. And we know that it's a normative part of life. There are things that happen in our lives that we cannot avoid, that we cannot ignore, and that we must learn to deal with. We can say it in the life of a child, you can see moving from one location to the next. We can look at moving from one school, middle school to high school, parental divorce, parental loss. It can go from very little things to life-altering. And it's the ability to, with the help of others and with the skills that you've learned over time, to figure out how to live in this new reality. We can overburden children. We can say, oh, he or she is resilient, and push onto them developmentally inappropriate burdens. That's not what we mean.
For example, what? For example,
so if there's a child in a family and they are placed in a position to be the go-between between parents who are having difficulty between each other, or who has experienced something in school that goes beyond just the normal daily stressors, but they're being actively bullied and in such a way that it is detrimental to them. We can sometimes over-rely on the concept of resilience and just say, get over it, or don't be such a baby. That shouldn't bother you. That's not resilience. That is minimizing. That is not allowing the child to discuss and verbalize and work through problems, right? That's not resilience. That's being abandoned.
Okay. That's a very good distinction, because you do want to sort of you don't want your child to be hurt, right? Or you don't
Right.
want them to feel, you know what that feels like. You've been through rejection, you know. So when your child is rejected in some way or doesn't get what they want, and I don't mean, get the whatever pumpkin spice latte that they wanted at the time that they wanted.
Right.
I'm not talking about that, but something,
Right.
maybe they didn't make the basketball team or they didn't, get into the school that they wanted. It's really it's a subtlety, but it's a very important one that you bring up about not minimizing that and how far you go to make it a learning experience and to
Yes.
make sure that that is something that will build on for the next thing. I mean, my kids are a little older now, so
Yeah.
I have to tell them that, you don't get every job that you interview for. You don't, because we went through the everyone gets a trophy, which I'm not. I'm a former college athlete. I didn't get a trophy for a long time. I'm not a big believer. I personally, from experience, I'm not a big believer in everyone gets a trophy. It would not have made me very tough.
No. And I think the importance is, as you just said, that it happens throughout childhood.
Mm-hmm.
It would be very difficult if you were an individual who at age 24 or 23 first experienced your big, massive setback. You didn't get a job you wanted. You didn't get into the graduate school you wanted. You can, if the parent has protected that child, bubble wrapped him up until that point, then the impact is even greater, right? So you need to almost inoculate that child and have them learn over time. Setbacks will happen. They can rely on others to help deal with setbacks, and they have the skills for that because they've practiced. It's like you were saying, you were an athlete. You don't just show up the day of a game and just go out there. It is practice. It is training. It is both skill-based and endurance-based, right? Because if you just show up the day of a match or a meet, you're in a world of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've had endurance training and you've practiced the basic skills, and if it's a team sport, you've interacted with others and you know your role, you can't guarantee the win, but you now know what to do and how to deal with it if you were to lose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's a great point. And I don't know that we think about it as such when we're in it, when we're in the trenches with your kids, and it's almost like, I can fix this really quick, and so let me help you out with that type of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, don't worry about that, you'll get, that. So we minimize things. I get it, because you don't want them to feel the hurt that whatever, but it is so important. It is so important. I get that. Intellectually, like you said before we even started recording, you have children, and there's this divide between being the professional and parenting your child. We know intellectually what we know, but...
Right. And intellectually, we know that each child has to learn to deal with the events, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to be side by side with them forever.
Yeah.
And yet
We're
when
not.
you're confronted... No. And yet when you're confronted with the child in front of you who's crying, or you can see is heartbroken, we love that child. We love that child to the depths of our soul. And our first response is, how can I fix this?
Yeah.
How can I make this better? And sometimes you can't, and sometimes you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And that is very hard.
Right. Let's talk about you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that you shouldn't. What?
Right.
I don't even know where to begin with that question. You shouldn't. It's really hard. Even as, and we're gonna jump to that they're a little more adult now. That's just because that's where my kids are, and then I want to go back to the effects that we have on them and how we develop them as infants. But we shouldn't. I get that there's high school, there's college. I have one in high school. I have one just out of college, and I have one that's older than that now, looking for apartment and things like that. And I find myself, diving in to help with the apartment search. And I understand that there's a certain bit of support that I give in helping her and deciding, no, you don't want to live there, you want to live there. But there's also this piece where maybe I shouldn't. At what point, where does that come in of where I shouldn't,
And there's no clear way always to understand. So for example, my younger daughter is a college student in New York City, right? Found an apartment in Brooklyn. It's safe. It's close to school. It's okay. Would I want to live there right now? No. But it is her domain and where she can thrive. And it's sometimes separating out our wishes and our needs from theirs. There are things where sometimes they make choices where you're like, oh, that's not going to turn out very well. But the negative consequence is not so large and life-altering that I have to intervene, right?
Yeah.
So they go on a trip and they put it on their credit card and you're like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. But I'm not going to jump in and pay it for her.
Right.
And but I am going to listen to her. And she's like, oh no, how am I going to budget for this now? I can help support that.
Right.
If they were to make choices that I find would be not safe, and then yes, right, that's when you are still a parent and you're like, no, you shouldn't do that. That's not,
it's not safe. Mm-hmm.
That's not safe. Right. Again, she's living in New York City. I can only imagine the things you could do in New York City that aren't safe. Right.
Yeah.
And were I to hear about them prior to, I'd be like, oh no, right now I have to I can't stop you, but I can tell you in the most strongest words, that is not something you should be doing. That's not resilience. That's danger.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as, not simple because it sounds simple, but in the moment it's complicated. Having a student in high school, like you said, and they have the teacher that's known as being very tough. At what point is it like, well, yeah, you drew the short straw and you have this very tough teacher and you're just going to have to tough it out all year and learn to deal with their expectations, their communication style. That is a learning experience. Versus, no, this is really not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
It is an inappropriate way of interacting with the students, or the expectations are inappropriate. And I, as a parent, should step in an appropriate manner, either talking to the teacher, talking to the principal. In the moment, it can be really difficult to tell what is, yeah, you got the tough teacher this year, but I know you can handle it, versus, no, I really do need to step in and protect my child from an inappropriate threat.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I hear you say that, and I hear a lot of parental control that is needed in order to roll the way you should, or decide what you should do, what you shouldn't do, where you insert yourself and where you don't. At the point that they're in high school and college, my feeling is I've probably made these either mistakes or choices as a parent long ago, maybe even in their infancy. So let's back up a little bit because now we're talking about kids are anxious. They don't have resilience. They're not confident. There's a lot of factors that go into that. The one that we can have some control over, I guess, is our own communication with them from the moment that they're born, right?
Yes. And I think one of the ways that parents do this naturally often is that they are scaffolding the ways in which their child views the world, interprets the world, and then reacts to it. Even from the earliest months, we narrate for our children before they're verbal, right? Oh, we're going to the park. Isn't that a lovely duck on the lake? What do you think of this? Oh, that duck is coming towards us, right? So you're giving the child the words with which they can give meaning to their world before they can. And what we are doing consciously and unconsciously is slowly scaffolding their interaction with the environment and little by little removing ourselves, right? Stepping back and allowing them to grow into their own process. And that requires communication that changes over time. From us being the narrator to often being the semi-silent partner that listens to their retelling of what's happening to them, what they're thinking about, being that listener and sometimes reflecting back to them what they've said. And if the time is right, potentially giving them a little bit of advice, right? And that happens slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever really seen a parent of a 10-year-old narrating the way we do for young children,
Right.
because we've naturally transitioned to the dialogue, naturally transitioning to now pointing things out and letting them tell us what they think about it. But I think what's important is that communication has to be continuous and strong and dynamic from the beginning.
Mm.
It is very difficult to be the parent that didn't engage in this give and take. And when the child is older and less controllable, now start with I told you, you must do this. I am setting the rules. Yes, you are the parent. Yes, you do set the rules. But if there's no communicative base there or a strong relationship, you just stating something is no longer going to lead to the outcome you want. You can make a child get dressed when they're 5.
Yeah.
You can't physically restrain or impede a child when they're 17.
Right.
Right? If they wish to leave, they will leave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where power dynamics must shift in some way over time. And it's done through communication, not through physical domination.
Right. I know that you've done research about childhood anxiety and the responsibility of the parent and how they watch how parents cope with different things. Can you talk about that a little bit and what you've discovered?
Sure. So anxiety is interesting in that if you think about mental health issues in general, they tend to peak in adolescence and early adulthood. You know, they really are appearing at those ages. Anxiety is different in that children as young as 5 can show clinically impairing anxiety. Most children don't. Even the shyest of children aren't clinically anxious. We think it emerges that early for 2 reasons. One, it's genetic. It has a very strong genetic component. And secondly, it is the way the child responds to a world that they find uncontrollable, unpredictable, and somewhat threatening. And the response is anxiety. And it is a response that fits with the psychological profile of a young child. Many of the mental health concerns that we think about young children aren't capable of really showing them that young. Parents play an important role. Part of it is the genetics, right? And there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
There's no blame in that. But sometimes parents, when they see a child who is anxious, again, stemming from our deep-seated love of the child, is to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a young child, and when you have a young child, often it's shown as social anxiety. So you take them to a play date and they don't like it. They don't want to be there. Or you sign them up for TAP and they refuse to even leave your side. An anxious parent or a parent that's very protective might say, don't worry, we don't have to do that anymore. We won't come back. And what you've done is not allow the child to learn how to deal with that initial anxiety to become resilient. Going back to what we were talking about earlier.
Right. Yeah.
So it is scaffolding for the child. We don't say, and we don't mean pick your child up, throw them into that dance studio and walk away. That's too much. That's going to be overwhelming. But it might mean, and this is sometimes hard for parents, like you go to Saturday morning ballet class and there are these parents that seem to just have it all figured out. They show up, they've got their pumpkin spice latte, the child walks in, says, bye, mom, walks right in, and they can just sit there quietly.
Right.
While you're just sweating buckets because your child is clinging to you. You're going to have to walk into the studio with them. You might have to sit in the corner because they don't want you to leave the room. And it seems like, what have I done wrong? And you haven't done anything wrong. You just have an anxious child, a shyer child. But what you're doing is slowly but surely, first they might just sit next to you. Then they might get closer to the other kids. By the third session, they might be doing the dance, but you have to sit in the room. By the fifth session, they just need to make sure you're in the hall, right? And so it's much slower and deliberate and harder than for other children.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important because what you're learning is how to help your child get the skills they need. Because again, like we said earlier, you're not always going to be by their side. And you can protect them when they're 5. It's much harder to be protective when they're 15.
So if you don't start that behavioral change, your own behavioral change to say, okay, I'm gonna eventually end up in the hallway and mom's gonna leave, or dad's gonna leave, what ends up happening?
They become even more withdrawn.
Mm.
They are less likely to engage in developmentally appropriate social interactions. And it's one thing when they're younger, 3 and 4, and you are really controlling their environment. You decide whether they have a play date or not. You can decide whether they sign up for an extracurricular activity or not. But once they get into school, unless you are literally going to homeschool them or place them in a special protected program, they will be confronted with their peers. They will be confronted with teachers. They will be confronted with schedules that they can't bend necessarily to their own needs. And again, like we were talking about, don't let it be at age 23 when your child first confronts that major setback.
Right.
Don't let it be kindergarten or first grade when your child confronts the fact that they live in a social world and they need to overcome, with help, that anxious response.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's say you waited a little bit longer than you should have. Let's say, I mean, it happens, right?
Yeah.
And your child is that 20-something, even, I mean, we're jumping all the way there, and they do get their setback, or maybe they're not getting a job that you think that they should get, maybe. And the resilience maybe is not there, right? This is the first time that, so how can we as parents support them now? Because maybe we did make some mistakes or didn't really cut that umbilical cord the way we should have as we went.
Yeah. And it's not always mistakes. It is just events that occur, right? Yeah. I think back to 2008, where I had younger colleagues who had just finished their training and normally would have gone into, positions that would typically have been there every year. And with the fiscal uncertainties of 2008, everything just disappeared, right? And it was no fault of their own. So it's not as if their parents or their advisors made a mistake. It's that the world changed.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
If you think about COVID, the world changed and you weren't prepared for these changes because how could you have been prepared? So sometimes it's standing shoulder to shoulder with your child and trying to figure out in communication, in dialogue, what can we do? What should you do? Mm-hmm. And it is, again, this in the moment, there seems to be no right answer. And let me be so extreme. Let me be hyperbolic and say, if your child is in danger of being homeless because they can't pay their rent or they, at that level, you step in, you intervene.
Right.
Because that's a health, safety, well-being. Is it that they have to work as a barista for a year and they are eating ramen and they're not living the life they thought for themselves? Right. Then that's a dialogue. That's helping them talk through it and strategize and reframing it as a temporary setback. It's not, I'm going to give you the resources you need so you can live the life you think you should be living.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where, in the moment you have to make these decisions, and there's not necessarily the best right decision.
That's a really great point that you bring up, because when you raise your kids to live the life that you've created, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go out and they need to live their own life. And where do you draw the line, or where do you say,
Right.
yeah, right? There are some comedians who do a great bit about that, about, their kids having to change their life dramatically. And it's, where do you draw the line? How do you handle that as a parent?
I don't think there's one correct answer,
Okay,
but I think
fair.
it's still that developmental transition. And just like when the kids were younger, while some kids at age 7 were able to do, they made their own lunches, they picked out their own clothes,
Yeah.
they were self-sufficient. And other 7-year-olds, you had to make sure they were wearing underwear, right?
Yeah.
The transition
Yeah.
takes a little longer. With a young adult, there's going to be those changes and those differences. So you might have one child who is just seem to have everything together and is just really self-sufficient and is growing into what you picture as that independent adult.
Yes.
And for other children, they might need more of that scaffolding and that conversation
Right.
and that reflection. And it doesn't happen overnight. Yes, you should not be supporting and treating your 30-year-old the way you treat a 20-year-old.
Okay.
But
you got to
there
tell them
isn't-
that too. They need to
You
know
got to
that.
tell them that. They have to know that expectation. But there isn't some day where you wake up and this is the morning that I now treat them completely radically different.
Yeah.
Because it emerges slowly.
It's a transition.
Just like from 7 to 17, it emerges slowly
Mm-hmm.
as you step back little by little and let them take things on.
Yeah.
So if at 17 you're still treating them the way you treated them at 7, something is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it changes across domains and across time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not linear.
Mm-hmm. So as a parent, how do I stay accountable to make sure?
Right.
Yeah. You laughed. But how do I stay accountable?
Right. I think for me, and I think in terms of the literature, often it's having support of other parents.
Okay.
Especially if they're in the same age range as your children. So you can commiserate.
Yeah. Have conversations. What are you doing? Yeah.
Right, are you doing? And you can see what's normal.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes it's hard to remember what we were like at that age. And it is important to also remember the world is very different than it was when we were that age.
Completely.
So I turned 20 years old in 1994. 1994 is radically different than 2025, right? And while there are some fundamental psychological truths and social truths that still remain, how I go about my life and what are the options I have and the opportunities, what are the barriers I'm facing, can be radically different 30 years later. So I need to understand what's normal, what's universal, and what has historically and socially and culturally changed.
Right.
And I cannot expect my children to live 1994 lives.
Right. Right. So how has it changed?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say it.
Yeah. One, I think for all of us, but I think it's more acutely felt, is this having our lives be digitized in ways that we just never had before. I mean, we're talking to each other right now. This is going to go out to others. And that's a really important and positive things. People can access information and guidance and support in ways that they never could before. But we also have the fact that our children are seeing curated visions of other people's lives and where they are that is not always obviously curated. And they don't necessarily intuitively understand what an algorithm is.
Mm-hmm.
And children have this developmental tendency, and it's normative, to use very stark thinking and stark language. Always.
Yeah.
Never. Right? You never let me do this.
Right.
You always do that. Everyone is doing this. Nobody has to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And it was bad enough when you're just dealing with you and your child. But when you have social media or other electronic input, it can really seem that every other child on the planet gets to do something,
Right.
or has it all together and never feels shy, awkward, gangly, pubescent, right? And it's sometimes helping that child understand the reality of life and the presentation of life. And those two things aren't the same. When your child is older, it still kinda is still there. Let's go to the example, graduated, the job market is really rough. They're working at a job they didn't foresee for themselves. And it just seems everybody else got that internship, got that first position, is, vacationing in Mexico,
Right.
and
On
just
a private
has
plane. Yeah. Everybody's doing that.
Everybody's doing that. And it's snippets. And everyone can edit a 15-second video to make it look perfect. And we know that intellectually, psychologically, and emotionally, it can hit us. And even as parents, we've always had that tendency to compare our children to those of others. Why aren't you more like your cousin? He's a doctor.
Yeah.
Why aren't you more like,
Yeah.
And that gets amplified, I think, in the ways in which our communication styles and our social media and Facebook and email all lets that be at our fingertips.
I never really, look at me, never, always, whatever. I'm gonna use all the words, right? Okay, right. Let me spit this out then. I didn't realize how much, and maybe you can speak to this, how much what we do as parents impacts our kids, meaning our response to their life in some way, their test scores, their grades, their athletics, their friendships, that we don't think about it as parents. The kids walk in, they tell you something at school and happened at school, and you may make a comment. Fortunately, I have 3 children, and unfortunately for the first one, I probably learned for the second one and for the third, but I'm sure that things came flying out, that I didn't think about. And
because you're human.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually not a bad thing. I'm not saying let it rip, be dysregulated.
Yeah.
Right? What I'm saying is that we are humans, and we are showing our children our humanity, and then showing them how we respond to that humanity. And that is teachable moment. So if there were days I remember coming home and I'm tired and it's been a bad day. And I walk in and the first thing I see is just a pile of stuff by the front door.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, it's annoying. Yes, they've been told millions of times to put your stuff away. And I yelled. And I yelled in a way that was harsher than the sin of throwing your backpack by the front door.
Right.
And in that moment, I am being a human. And then once I've kind of put myself back together and I go, look, I'm sorry I yelled. I was being really harsh. I had a bad day. And I apologize for that. However, you're not supposed to leave your stuff there. And you've been told more than once. So let's figure out what we need to do so that you remember to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not, you're not now saying, oh, I'm never going to say, I'm going to let you do whatever you want. And I'm going to change the rules, but I'm going to let you know that I'm a person, and we're going to work this together because we're creating a relationship. Like if you think about it in terms of your personal life, you meet someone new, you get to know them, you have this idealized self that you're presenting to them. And slowly but surely, each of you get to show each other deeper, more nuanced, less perfect versions of yourself. And if you never allow your relationships to get to that point, the relationship stays shallow. they say non-nourishing, and they're likely to fall apart.
Oh, that's so interesting. Can you dive into that just for a second there? So if you don't make it any deeper, and how does that happen?
It is showing up as your real authentic self.
Yeah.
In a developmentally appropriate way. I always add that caveat, right? Our children are our children, and we shouldn't treat them as our peer or as a friend or, right? But our relationships with our children have to evolve. They have to grow. They have to deepen. And part of that is showing them more and more about who we are over time as they're able to take that in and understand it appropriately.
Yeah.
Right. So when I talk to my 24-year-old, I can share with them, oh, that happened to me. I felt very anxious. This is what I did. And they can take that as advice.
Mm-hmm.
They can take that just as a data point. But we're having a conversation where I am now slowly becoming more of a peer-ish over time. When that child was 14, I would not have self-disclosed in the same way.
Right.
But I would have said, yeah, sometimes I feel anxious. Or yeah, sometimes I feel really cruddy and I snap. And that's something I'm really working on. And this is what I do when I feel like I'm going to snap at people. And they're like, oh, yeah, I feel that way too. And so this is what I do, right? So you're creating a real relationship with this child. If you don't do that, there's nothing, there is no obligation for a child into their 20s and 30s. My oldest is 24, so I'm projecting. To continue to have a strong, intimate relationship with you. Because at some point, when they are independent, when they are living their own lives, they're not coming to you for material support.
Yeah.
They're coming to you for psychological and social support. And if that psychological and social support wasn't enriched and supported and scaffolded over time, there's no need to come back.
Yeah, you're right. Is there a moment or an age where you can say that really turns, or is it so, some people say, wow, I don't know when that changes. I go from mommy and daddy role where I'm really do this, do that, it's my way or the highway type of a thing, to we're in this together.
I think a lot of that starts to emerge in adolescence, in the high school years. Partly is a physical reality. If you were dependent on physical intimidation and your power over a child to get them to do what you wanted, that will end I'm only 5 feet tall. By age 12, right? That physical
getting
advantage,
into the car seat. Yeah, you're not doing that anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not doing that anymore. But also they're making choices that are long-term and impactful. Sometimes you can demand, but sometimes you have to help them work their way through.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it strikes you as a parent, like when you're talking to your high school freshman and they have to pick classes and you realize, oh gosh, if they don't pick this particular math class as a freshman, by the time they're a senior, they're not going to be in calculus. And if they're not in calculus, that's going to put them at a disadvantage for getting into college, if that's their path. If they wish to be an artist, and they are, they wish to go into music, oh my goodness, we have to make sure we're structuring their day, their lessons. An athlete, if I think I'm going to be an athlete after high school, how am I shaping my day? If I drop a team, that's not like when they were 5 and they didn't want to do T-ball anymore. You're really going to walk through that decision with them and go, do you understand the consequences? I'm not going to demand that you stay in the sport because I want you to be the elite athlete. But if you drop it, understand what you're going to lose and understand that that is not easily regained. It's in high school when they are really faced with life-altering decisions. Am I going to go to college? Am I going to a trade? If I go to college, what type of college and career? As a biological adult, but not legal or psychological adult, what are the choices I can make as an adolescent that unknowingly are life-altering? Do I drink? Do I drink and drive? Do I engage in sexual activity? What are these choices that I'm making that mom and dad aren't going to be there when I have to make that choice? And you have to equip them with the skills to make these choices in a way that's self-protective and healthy.
Right. My mom used to say, she had this saying, and she's since passed away, but she used to say that when the kids were small problems. Yeah. The bigger they get, the bigger the problems. And I remember I remember thinking, but when they're older, they can handle that, or they'll, now they're little, I have to make sure they're fed and that they're cared for. And now that my children have grown and they're older, I completely understand what she was saying.
Yeah.
Those are really significant things.
Yes, but it's not a message that's really well understood. Like when you're in the thick of it, when you haven't slept in 3 days and someone has an ear infection and this one over here still needs to go, to soccer practice, being told, oh, those are little problems.
Yeah. They don't feel little.
In the moment.
Yeah.
No, they're not little. In the moment, your stress hormones are pumping and you don't know if you can make it to the weekend. To be told, don't worry, it's going to get even bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Not very helpful, right? But we grow into our children being different people. And so the stressors change and we're more equipped, right? We went through 20 years of life with these children. And so, yes, the problems are bigger, but we know them better and they know us better.
Parenting is really hard.
And it is not as if there is a parenting. Across families, parenting looks different. Within families, I have 2 children, you have 3. With every child, you are a different parent, not because you have favorites, but because each child is different. And the wording, the behavior, the activity that would have been supportive and nurturing for one child would cause this other child to completely fall apart. And you're asked to be different people with different children.
Yeah.
And that is hard.
Yeah. So how can we support our fellow parents to be good parents every day, from adolescence to adulthood to all the different age groups? Like, how do we be the best that we can be?
I think is showing, just like we do with our children and we do with our families, that social support component. Sometimes we are there just to listen as other parents tell us what's happening. We are there to be a supportive ear to them because sometimes they just need to verbalize. Again, when I add the developmentally appropriate, there are things that you want to say that you want to do that you can't because it's not appropriate.
Right.
But you can go to your friend and say, oh my gosh, she drove me up the wall today.
Right.
Because you can't do that to your child because that's inappropriate. But to your friend, you can verbalize it and they can go, yes, I totally understand. Sometimes you can go to other parents for advice and they go, well, when that happened, this is what I did. And might not completely work for your child because it's a different person. Yeah. But you can modify it and see. Yeah. It's a lot of talking and a lot of listening. Okay. And I wish it was I wish we could really give, like, these are the 5 steps. You do these 5 things, concrete things, and you'll be fine. And instead we give very broad, sometimes frustratingly vague advice. Listen to your child. Scaffold them. have goals for them that you help them gain and get to. Well, that's awesome. But what do I do today when he's 8 and he's decided he doesn't want to go to school anymore? And he says, I'm never going to go to school again. Your 3 things aren't helping me this moment.
Yeah.
But it's then applying okay, why doesn't he want to go to school? Is it because he just doesn't feel like it? Is it because something's happening at school that's really psychologically difficult?
Yeah.
Do I talk him into it? Do I go to the school? Like, you then walk through all of the steps to then figure out, because your goal is this child should be educated, right?
Yeah.
You don't want an 8-year-old dropout.
Well, and I think that you're touching on some great points, because it does feel vague sometimes. You just want an exact, what exactly do I do in this moment? And I think that having that support system, whether it's through, your own mom, my mom always gave great advice, or it's your friends, or it's a therapist, or it's someone at school.
Yes.
I do think that the talking, what I'm hearing you say is you have to have these conversations. We're kind of in this together. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And the goal is we want a confident child. We want a self-sufficient child. We want a resilient child. We want to have a relationship with that child.
Yes.
That's the goal, right? If you can hit all that.
And that the relationship is self-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
That the relationship is not based on the fact that they depend on you.
Yeah. Right.
Or that you have the power to tell them what to do.
Right.
That's not a relationship. When they're younger, you are much more in control, and you have to be.
Right.
But if you are unable to relinquish that little by little and replace it with this dyadic back and forth, it's not going to end well.
Right, right. We didn't talk about perfectionism. I don't want to keep you that much longer, but if we could talk about it just for a moment, because we're pushing in this culture, do better, more. It will backfire.
Yes. And I think we parents have a goal for our child, right? Sometimes it's the very traditional class-based doctor, lawyer, Ivy League educated, right? Yeah. That means I was a good parent. If you can walk around with that diploma from the Ivy League school, I must have been a good parent, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the goal. That is an achievement. My child is a D1 athlete, right? Full ride. That's awesome. But that doesn't mean necessarily you were a good parent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if the goal must be this perfection or this idealized, predetermined outcome, and you don't get the child who naturally fits that predetermined outcome, it's going to be very difficult. God forbid you envision having a doctor and it turns out you have a painter. Because the parenting you need to allow that child to grow into their skill, into their artistry, to be able to fully communicate and be the artist they were born to be is different than what you needed to do to help the child buckle down, pass chemistry, get into med school. And if you try to mold one child into over here, that's going to be where you say the backfiring.
Yeah.
Both are perfect outcomes.
Yeah.
Because the child became who they were meant to be.
Yeah.
And that can't always be predetermined.
The perfectionism, define that. Go ahead, and how do you define perfectionism?
I think perfectionism is this notion that, again, depending on the age of the child, there is an activity or a status that the child is thought to have to meet, and they have to meet it almost effortlessly. We want the child that makes straight A's. We want the child who is captain of the cheerleading squad, who gets into the best school and does it in a way that just comes out. Because if it's a hard struggle or a slog, they're not meeting, why is it so hard for you? How did you get that B? You must not be working hard enough, right? And it is this notion that predetermined profile has to be met at all times and in all domains. I am a straight A student. I am the most popular kid in school. I am captain of this squad. I will get the role in the play.
Mm-hmm.
Anything less than that is unacceptable. Anything less than that is failure.
Yeah. And what's the backfire? What does backfire look like?
You walk away, right? So I remember, my younger daughter now is a writing major. She's always loved to write. But I do remember once I think she was 3rd, 4th grade, she was doing her homework. She was writing something out and she didn't quite do it the way she wanted to.
Yeah.
So she erased it and did it again. Wasn't quite right. Erased it, did it again. And erased it so much that she made a hole in the piece of paper in the homework sheet.
Yeah.
And she fell apart because now she had to submit this damaged piece of paper. And the teacher would know that she had erased something. And I had to kind of calm her down and explain to her, it's okay. We don't always do things perfectly on the first try. That the teacher expects you to make an error. And the fact that you noticed the error and tried to fix it is a good thing.
Yeah.
And that the teacher's not judging you on being perfect at the first try, but she's looking at the way in which you think through a problem and come to that solution. That's an important skill.
Yeah.
And that you will be lauded for doing that. But to her, it was like, oh my gosh, there's a hole in my piece of paper.
Right.
You see this sometimes in sports and arts where the pressure is so intense that the child just walks away, drops the team.
Yes. Doesn't do it. It's like debilitating.
It's debilitating. It's no longer enjoyable.
Yeah.
It is no longer something that feeds you and instead takes something away from you.
Yeah.
And I'd rather not do it at all. If I can't meet your external expectations, that I must be on varsity, that I must be the captain, that I must somehow prove my worthiness to you by being good at this. And not just good at it, the best.
Okay. So let's dive in, pausing, but diving into that as a parent who is pushing their child and you get to that point where you recognize they're not really having fun, or I'm recognizing what is the opposite of doing that, of being that pushing perfectionist parent. Where can that parent go the other way?
Right. I think in some ways it's a little easier with extracurricular activities because there isn't that notion of a mandate. Often what I think, especially as the children get older, what are you deriving from this activity? Do you like doing it? Are you doing it for pleasure? Do you like dancing? Is it something that brings you joy?
Yeah.
Or do you dread going to dance class? If you dread it, let's step away, right? This is something that we do to bring you joy. That's not to say, especially when the kids are little, that you give them complete carte blanche. Often with little kids, what we say is like, say, for example, if they sign up for T-ball or Little League, you signed up for a season. We're going to finish the season.
Yes, I have had to do that.
If you don't want to come back, that's fine.
Right.
But we're not going to do the weekly. This week I'm in baseball. Next
Yeah.
week I want you to sign me up for hockey.
Yeah.
The week after. We're not dilettantes.
Yeah.
We're learning to make commitments. We're learning to meet our commitments and then decide if we want to continue.
Yeah.
Again, that's skill building for when they're an adult.
Right.
And they got to go to work and they don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to go.
Yeah. You got to go.
You signed up
Yeah.
for this, right?
Yeah.
It's a little harder with academics. We can't just step back and say, oh, you don't want to do homework? Okay.
Right.
Right? And so we can't just let them just say, I don't like math, so I'm not doing math. I don't do math. It is, again, almost a commitment. This is part of your education. It's important. I'm not going to insist that you take AP Calculus 1. We'll find the math class that's the best match for your skill level, but we're not just going to say, I'm walking away from writing. You know, my child doesn't like to write. I'm going to email the teacher and ask them, is it
Ooh.
okay if they don't write the essay that week?
Yeah. Wow. Right.
No, it's not okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of you going back to saying to really listen, to really be present, to have this constant reevaluation of what's really happening, not what you want to happen or you thought would happen, but of a real awareness about what actually is happening.
And that's why it's so exhausting at times. Because
Right.
you can't just sit back and like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I fixed it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the minute you think you fixed some issue or concern, they're growing. They're
Yes.
you know, middle school was hard, but we got it down.
Yeah.
High school is an entire different ecosystem.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Right? Oh, my child thought they were going to be a gymnast and they were dedicated to this and I supported them and they grew 4 inches over the summer. And now coach is telling them, well,
right.
You can keep at it, but you're never going to be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you then help them reframe their identity, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't a problem 2 years ago. It's a problem now.
Right. And parenting never ends.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I think that's. I mean, I never thought it was going to end, but I guess I did think when they got out of college, I sort of wondered what that looked like. It looks very similar to, I don't know, when they were in college, I guess, in some ways.
In some ways, that's a fantastic and awesome outcome of your parenting over the last 2 decades. That this relationship is sustained and reinforcing even as they move into their own adulthood and independence.
Yeah.
That it doesn't just get severed by some date or some milestone. That you've created a real relationship with them.
Yeah.
And now it might be, as they get even older, bordering on friendship, right? You have succeeded as a parent. You have done it.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel very blessed with my children. But I guess when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to think of what you want it to look like in 20 years. You're not thinking about in 20 years. You're getting through the fever. You're getting through all the carpooling. You're getting through not turning in papers. You're getting through siblings fighting and working that out and telling them how important it is that they get along and respect each other and all of those things. All of those things.
Right. We're in the moment. You're like, how can this child be this way?
Yeah.
What did I do?
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't always like your children. You love them.
Oh, yeah. I've used that line before when they've done something really just that I really haven't liked. And I've just said, you know, I will love you no matter what you do. I will love you so you can do whatever. And I am going to be here. I'd appreciate it if you did X, Y, and Z a little bit better, but I will still be here. There is no one who will love you more than your mother or your father. So, and they realize that, I think that that's the other thing as they get older, and a lot of my friends, because they have kids a little bit younger, will ask me, wow, your kids come back, or did they want to hang out with you on a Friday or Saturday night? And I say, high school is tough. And then they kind of get to college. And I feel like there's this moment in college that they sort of recognize that they're not living at home anymore, and that this is sort of their life. And then they kind of like home, and they come back and they seem, just at the point when they're supposed to move out, they're so pleasant.
Yeah. Well, I think, especially as they enter what we call emerging adulthood.
Yeah.
It's a safe base for them. It's funny because just this morning, my daughter sent me an email. She bought bus tickets to come visit because she missed home. She needed and she wanted a weekend where she could be home. She could see her friends. She could temporarily revert back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'll make her favorite food.
Yeah.
We'll sit on the couch and watch a movie together, right? Just a little respite.
Yes.
From the daily, oh my gosh, I have to learn how to be an adult.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really important too. I've said to my husband, I said, I will always want them to feel like they can come back, not to live. I mean, they could feel that they want to, but I don't want them to want that. I want them to want to be independent, but I also just want them to know that this is a safe place, that this is, they're going to get a hug here, whatever that may look like. So what can parents do? Let's just give some takeaways of parents today who just want to be better. Let's give them a couple things that they can just work on today. What can you come up with there?
Sure. I think the first thing is to take a step back and really think about, and this, you could look at how your child behaves, what he or she says, who their friends are. Who is your child? Are they shy? Are they exuberant? Are they athletic and physically well put together, like kinesthetically? Are they artistic? Are they sensitive? Get to know who your child is, not who your child you wish them to be. And when you have a sense of who they are, how do you help them grow into their best self? Not changing them, but empowering them to be who they best are. That is hard, but I think it's really important. And to give up the notion of who you thought your child would be necessarily.
Right.
That's one. 2, recognize that this, as you said earlier, is a marathon. And your child needs you. Your child needs you to be there for them, present, and well-balanced, and healthy. And that may mean sometimes stepping away for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And making sure you are well, that you are healthy, that you have fed your own needs. Our needs don't go away the day we give birth.
Yeah. Right.
And it is not being a bad parent if you do not sacrifice every component of your life to meet the needs and wishes of this child.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Those 2.
And 2. And then 3, get to know your child as they get older and create a relationship. You meet new people at work. You meet new people in the community. You don't assume everything about them. And you don't impose on them what they're going to do next. And to some extent, as your children get older, you're getting to know them and you're creating a relationship. And that means taking part of your parenting and setting it aside and becoming a different person in relation to them.
Yeah. That's a lot of awareness.
It's hard. Yeah. And you can't have that awareness daily.
Yeah.
There will be days where it would be a Herculean task to have that level of zen and self-reflection and self-awareness. This isn't a daily activity, but over time,
right,
you engage in that, right? over time, you can take a moment and reflect and then go back into the trenches.
Right. Okay. Well, this is amazing. I wish that I had spoken to you when my kids were infants.
Oh, I don't know if when my kids were infants, I don't know if I could have told you any of that.
Yeah.
I was still
right.
trying to get the older one to sleep more than an hour and a half at a time.
Right. Right. So there is a part of you that has to go through it and also have this awareness and be able to do this roller coaster and ebb and flow and be very cool with all the, you know, and maybe do something that wasn't exactly perfect, but okay, going back and learning from everything. So also being resilient as a parent, as an adult throughout all of this. Super hard, but very rewarding.
Very rewarding. And I think can be one of the lasting, nourishing, sustaining relationships in your life.
Yeah.
Different than others. We can't make it look like other relationships because it's unique. And in its uniqueness has a special role in our lives.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
I had a great time talking with you.